Hello and welcome back to Talking Treasures with me, Ben Miller, the Assistant Curator of Ceramics here at the Potteries Museum and Art Gallery. Today we're going to be taking a look at one jug in particular. Now this jug has a very interesting backstory and a story that wasn't really fully understood until very recently. So come with me into the ceramic stores and we'll take a closer look. So this is the piece in question. It's a wonderful ironstone jug made around about 1840. As we can see on the front here, it's a wonderful gilded inscription, William Brammer Longton. Named and dated ceramics are some of my favourite ceramics within the collection. I mean, there's clearly a story behind them, there's a reason they were made and a reason they carry the name of an individual or a location or a date, and it's the research that goes into finding out more about that person and more about that date. Why was it important? Why was this piece of ceramics made? Which is really interesting and can throw up some really interesting research. So this jug in particular, acquired by the museum in 2007, was initially acquired due to the belief that it showed images of salt glazing, so the act of salt glazing ceramics. I first became aware of this piece here when I was preparing for a handling session we do for different collector societies and people interested in ceramics who come here to the museum, and we're able to provide them with behind the scenes tours and handling sessions and things like that. So I'd picked this jug because of its name, William Brammer, the location Longton, and I wanted to know a little bit more about William Brammer and to share that with this group of people who were coming for the handling session. So, I mean, looking at the jug, we first kind of see this large depiction of what was previously thought to be mining. So we all know mining was a big industry here locally. We needed the coal to provide the energy, the fuel to fire the bottle kilns. And at first glances, it does look exactly like mining. It has a man with a pickaxe, a small wheelbarrow into which he's putting these dark lumps of what you would assume is coal, and then another two men here, one being lowered and one being raised out of this kind of open cast mine by two men operating a hand operating windlass. Now what did strike me was that this is relatively strange considering the jug is dated 1840. Not much open cast mining was happening here in Staffordshire in 1840. The mining by then was mostly done underground via kind of deep mine shafts and things like that. This relatively small scale open cast mining was quite a thing of the past. So that initially got me thinking, kind of, does this jug indeed show mining and salt glazing? And down the kind of rabbit hole I went. So looking at census returns, which staff here at the museum weren't able to do easily back in 2007, since then MyPast, Ancestry.com, things like that have really opened up the world of genealogy and genealogical research to individuals like you at home and us here at the museum. So it was time to find out who this Mr. William Brammer was of Longton. And it turns out in 1841 there's a William Brammer living in Longton. His occupation was a brickmaker. And that got me thinking about the rest of the scenes depicted in and around the jug. So if we go round to the other side, there's a small kind of vignette here, this decoration here, which shows a gentleman standing at what looks like a bench with a small child, maybe a young boy, young girl, standing at one end. You don't really get to see what the larger individual is doing at the bench as they have their back to the viewer. And around them, they're kind of boxed in with this right angle of what appears to be bricks. So it was kind of making sense, but I didn't really know the first thing about brick making in 1840 in North Staffordshire. But luckily here at the museum we have access to large amounts of archive material and journals and books and things. And coming to the rescue was Edward Dobson's treatise on brick and tile making, written and published in 1850, which gives an absolutely wonderful account of brick making and tile making here in North Staffordshire in 1850. And that publication proved absolutely invaluable in my research. So it turns out that what is actually being shown in this small depiction on the jug as a brickmaker going about his business, kind of throwing raw clay into a brick mould, which he was kind of then top off with a kind of cheese wire, remove the mould and you're left with basically a wet brick. The small child at the end of the bench is known as an off-bearer, and it will be their job then to take that brick away and just go and lay it on the ground to dry, and then to wash the brick mould and return it to the brickmaker so they could continue making bricks. And they would make hundreds and hundreds of bricks a day and have large kind of areas of open ground with these bricks drying prior to them going to be fired in the bottle kiln. Which brings us on to the third and probably largest portion of decoration on the jug, which is this very peculiar depiction of what you would assume is just a normal bottle kiln. Except this one has a ladder and a chap atop of the ladder doing something at the top of the kiln. Now, the reason for the acquisition of the jug was the belief that it showed salt glazing, which, if indeed it did, it would have been the only item here in the museum that depicts the act of salt glazing ceramics. But again, by 1840, the act of salt glazing pottery was pretty much absolutely kind of over, was redundant. Many other forms of pottery had surpassed, many other forms of glazing had surpassed salt glazing by then. So again, it didn't really seem to fit with the age of the jug. So what indeed could this man on top of a ladder at the top of a kiln be doing? So it was going back to Edward Dobson's wonderful treatise on brickmaking and trawling the internet to try and find evidence of what on earth a man at the top of a ladder could be doing when it comes to brickmaking. And with researching various, like I said, other publications and looking at other content online, I stumbled across a brickworks down in the south of England who still make bricks pretty much in the same way that they were made in the 19th century today, and they make bricks and they provide bricks to companies that provide kind of restoration for old buildings and conservation and things like that. And believe it or not, there was an image online showing pretty much the exact same action here, the only difference being that the kilns that the brickworks in the south of England use are known as beehive bottle kilns, and there's a downdraft as opposed to what we think is depicted here, which would have been an updraft kiln. So ultimately what this chap is doing, he's clamming up air openings at the top of the bottle kiln. So the act of firing bricks, as with pottery, is as you raise the temperature to achieve these high levels of heat, which then kind of solidify the ceramic. And depending on how high you go, and if you reduction fire, so if you deprive the kiln of oxygen and you fire the contents in a low oxygen atmosphere, it helps to kind of vitrify the contents, so make these very, very, very hard non-porous bricks, which I believe is being showed here. So Staffordshire blue brick, or engineering brick as it's also known, is an example of high-fired, non-porous, really, really hard brick used in the engineering industry. It was used in the 19th century for railway bridges and things like that. It was a very hard wearing brick. So ultimately that is what is depicted on this jug, and the wonderful thing is that we have a piece of ceramics here that the museum's acquired under the guise of one idea, one consensus that it was showing something unique and I say very quite rare. It turns out it's not actually showing that, but the depiction of brickmaking here in North Staffordshire, we don't have another piece in the collection that depicts brickmaking, mid-19th century brickmaking. So, I mean, the new attribution of this makes it no less wonderful, and it's equally unique in what it shows. And to think that, I mean, this was made for a humble brickmaker who lived in Longton, and presented to him, and 150 years later it's here and we're talking about it and exploring the wonderful world of brickmaking is pretty much what makes museums and wonderful places. We're surrounded here by hidden treasures, and yes, this is just one piece of the collection which I absolutely adore. It's not the most expensive, it's not the most fancy, but it tells a history, it tells the story of William Brammer, and encapsulates everything that is wonderful about the ceramics industry here in Stoke-on-Trent, and what makes it so important to kind of keep researching and keep learning and for us to all enjoy. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Mr. William Brammer and brick making here in North Staffordshire. Remember to join us again next time for more Talking Treasures.